without further ado, time to move on to our first session, which is the fundamentals of digital fundraising for small charities. And I am delighted to introduce Emily Casson, who's the digital marketing and fundraising manager for the Salvation Army. And Emily, over to you.
Hey, thank you, and delighted to be with you all this morning. And I will just share my presentation with you. So here to talk to you today about the fundamentals of digital fundraising. So like Claire was saying, this session is designed for small charities, so really taking it back to basics. So I currently work for a very large charity and was previously at Cats Protection, but I have a small charity background and I've been a trustee and consultant of various very small micro charities. So I really do get what it's like to start out in that digital fundraising journey, and hoping to make all of this very jargon free, that digital really shouldn't be scary, and really keen for everybody to get on board with it. So the plan today, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the basics of digital fundraising, and crucially about how do you go about developing your digital fundraising roadmap from scratch, that everybody's going to be from a different starting point, but this is really taking you through some of the basics. And also to inspire you a bit and talk a bit about what some other charities have done and kind of what's working well in the sector, and also about how we can build up our confidence, because a lot of people are kind of really nervous about the digital area, but it's great that you've all come along today and are really keen on growing your digital. So this is the motto, and this is kind of what I want you to all kind of take back to your organisations about how do we approach digital fundraising. That a lot of people think that you need all the big finished projects and the shiny new toys, but actually the fundamental is think big. What is your overall aim for your organisation? Why are you using digital? It's not just using digital for digital's sake. And how can you start small? What small steps can you take on your digital journey? And then if things are working, how can you scale quickly or fail fast? And I think talking about failure is extremely scary for a lot of people, but it's actually a really positive thing, because if you're not failing, you're not innovating. And if you're not innovating, you're not really pushing the boundaries, and you're always going to get the same results. And the beauty about digital is it offers phenomenal results in terms of income. And I think that's really crucial. So what is digital fundraising? There's a lot of very complicated definitions out there, but it's basically about raising money using digital technologies and channels. It really is as simple as that at its heart. And I think why all of us, that we all know kind of how fast digital's growing, particularly over the last year. The whole kind of digital landscape has changed. That there's a terrifying statistic from the start of COVID that came out of China that people were spending an average of 8.3 hours a day online. And that's not kind of continued, but people are spending an average of 2.4 hours a day online, which is slightly terrifying, but also really goes to show that's where your audience is, that's where people are interacting. And I think there's a lot of misconceptions that digital is just a fad or just for the younger generation, whereas the fastest growing group on Facebook is the over 75s. And over the last year in particular, a lot of people have become much more familiar with technologies. And I think it works for all sizes and budget. It doesn't matter whether your digital budget is 50 quid or whether it's 500,000, that a lot of the principles are the same. We can use a lot of the same channels. It is really very democratic like that. And it's been aware that not everybody has a lot of time and a lot of resource, but everybody can do digital. And we can't afford not to. It's kind of low risk, high reward channel. And the vast majority of charities will have some reason to use digital across different income streams, whether that's for your events, for individual giving, or for your major donors. There's a lot of potential applications. And it also allows us that sort of real-time analysis and what's working, so we can be really flexible and keen. So when we embark on our digital journey, and some of you may recognize this as King's Cross, that it'll look different for everybody, that everybody's at very different starting points. But not to worry about that, that the best time to start digital fundraising was probably 20 years ago. The second best time is today, that everybody can get on board and use this. So it's thinking about where are you as a charity and where do you want to get to, and how can digital take you on that journey? And a lot of people are very used to that sort of like 1 year, 3 year, 5 year planning cycle. Whereas with digital, it's becoming comfortable that actually we don't know where we're going to end up, but it's probably going to be somewhere really exciting and in a really good place for our charity. And that's okay. So something I want you to go back and do in your organisations is looking at what are the digital principles that you want to bring in that we can talk, and I know the session later around particular platforms or particular kind of products and projects you can do. But actually, if you get the approach right, then all of that flows from that. So this is one that kind of I'm using my current organisation. So our principles are this nice acrostic that we're going to be digital. So we're going to be dynamic. So we're going to adapt to trends and forward thinking. We're going to be innovative and push the boundaries and think, how can we do things in a different way? But we're also going to be very goal orientated and not take our eyes off the prize and get distracted. And I think it's crucial when you're looking at digital to be insight led. And that doesn't mean that you need a whole digital team or a whole insight team or agency. It just means, okay, what insights can we glean from the data we're currently collecting? And I think it's really important that digital should be a collaborative process. It should be thinking across your entire organization, how can you use digital? And how can you do that think big piece and be really, really ambitious about what you want to achieve as a small charity? That we're not talking about kind of, 5% growth, 10% growth. We're thinking, right, how can digital completely transform our fundraising? How can we double all of our fundraising? And have a constant test and learn approach. And I think that's so crucial when we're looking at digital, to really think that we don't need the finished product. It's how can we constantly build on that. So what does your roadmap look like? Like I said, it'll look very different for each organisation. So I'm going to talk a bit about kind of what are the goals for your organisation, where you're starting from, deciding what are the key channels you are going to utilise. And it doesn't have to be every channel. In fact, it really shouldn't be. And looking at what are the trends and opportunities that your charity could take advantage of. And what are the key enablers and barriers? That digital fundraising doesn't work in isolation. It needs to be really kind of brought in across the organisation. And people and culture are key. That digital's all about people. So how can we build that into our roadmap? So what are your aims and goals? This should be an easy one for everybody to do, because everybody should be able to articulate what are your organisational goals and your fundraising strategy. And actually, that's the same as digital, that digital fundraising strategies and plans, whatever you want to call them, shouldn't be in isolation. They should be absolutely fundamental for you, helping you to achieve your goals as a charity. So here's one that kind of I'm using my organisation. And in our case, we're really using it. We want acquisition of new audiences, but also stewardship of existing ones. And that's very much the focus that we've put. But the focus for your charity might be something different. So when you're building your roadmap, this should be your starting point at the end in terms of where do you want to get to. And this will evolve over time. And I think that's crucial to say, that you don't do a sort of digital fundraising roadmap and right, that's it, done. It's a constantly changing process. But thinking about where are you now, kind of what flower bud are you in terms of, there's various different assessments that you can do. There's the Charity Digital Code or the NCVO Digital Maturity Matrix, which are pretty simple tools that anybody can take advantage of to really benchmark kind of where are you now and where do you have gaps and what's working well. Or it might be a case of a simple having a team meeting with your kind of team, whether that's trustees, volunteers, staff members, and thinking, right, what's working well for us in digital at the minute? What could we build on? What gaps do we have? And benchmarking, where are you at now in digital income? And also really understanding your audience. And your audience is going to be different. That when you're looking at what channels you should put in the mix, the starting point should be, well, where's your audience already? Where's the easy wins? So then it's really important to have a multi-channel approach. that there's 1,000,001 different online channels that you could be at. So I think what I can't stress enough is that you don't have to be across everything. It's much better to do 1 or 2 channels really, really well and not be on the rest than try and spread yourself too thin. And I think every charity, regardless of a size, always has a resource issue. There's never enough money, there's never enough time, there's never enough people. So where do you want to focus your time? So it's thinking about social media and focus on 1 or 2. In most cases, that's likely going to be Facebook and making sure you've set up all your Facebook donate tools. But depending on the nature of your charity, that might also be Instagram or Twitter. It depends. Do you want to reach out to policymakers, or is it more about supporters? And for online giving, I think everybody's very aware at the minute there's been some changes in that landscape recently with Virgin Money. And I know Charity Digital did a recent podcast around that, which I'd urge you to listen to. And I think it's just being across 1 or 2 of the big online giving platforms and really giving people the opportunity to donate. But remembering that that's often just around the mechanism of donation rather than prompting people to donate. You still need to do all of that storytelling approach. I think for digital advertising, I would urge you, if you haven't already got your Google grant set up, then that is free money from Google. So it does take a little bit of managing, but what you often find is there's a volunteer in your network or a corporate that will do that as a CSR policy. So I'd really urge you to do that. And also dip your toe into Facebook advertising. And a lot of people think that you need a massive budget to do that, whereas in reality, I've done stuff before for 50 quid. So it really doesn't have to be expensive. And it also might be replacing printing leaflets, say, if you're advertising an event. And I think for email, I think my top tip would be go and sign up to a load of email newsletters and welcome journeys. See what other people are doing, see what you can adapt and what you can learn for your organization. And a lot of people are worried about sending too much email, whereas in reality, a lot of surveys show that people want more. They want to hear about the charities they're passionate about. But if the charities have something to say that move away from, right, we're going to do a monthly newsletter every month because we need to actually, we're just going to send an email when we've got something of relevance to our supporters that we want to tell them. And I think for website, my top tip for that would be find somebody else, whether it's somebody in the chat here or somebody outside of your organization, and just get them to do a bit of user testing. Somebody that's not connected with your charity at all, that doesn't know it, ask them simple questions. It might be a case of, right, these are the 3 actions we want people to be able to take on the website. So whether that's, okay, making a donation, finding how to sign up to this event, or finding more information about our cause, and get their feedback. And you'd be amazed at what you get back from that sort of user testing and really simple things that you can adapt. But often we're far too close to our own organizations and see it too regularly to actually be able to kind of get that insight. And if you have got a budget, there are some great companies that will run focus groups and everything for you and great tools. But I think my top tip would be do the quick and dirty, easy user testing. And I know for mobile, I know there's a session on later around that, but it's thinking how you can use it for donations, but also how you can do outbound messages and use it for stewardship for your organization. So I think it's important when you're building the roadmap to think about what are the key channels we want to be on. And it doesn't have to be all at once. It might be a case of, okay, so for month 1 in our roadmap, we're going to build up our social media presence. For month 2, we're going to look at our email welcome journey. And then we might move on to journeys for events and things. So it is really that starting small and what you can build up. And it's looking about what are the trends and opportunities. And you all know what works for your own organization. And people often separate the online and offline, whereas in reality, it is very much looking at, you know what works. Are you an events-led organization? In which case it's then looking for how you can bring that online. Or are you much more around the individual giving focus and thinking about how you can bring that to life? And I think it's what insights can you bring in? So some of that might be, like I said, your organizational insights, what works, what resource have you got, what insight have you got into the wider organization. I think it's really crucial that this isn't just around digital fundraising. This should be across the organization. And also thinking what's happening in the market. If you're a hospice, what other exciting campaigns are other hospices doing that you could build on and learn about for your organisation? And also, crucially, what is your audience doing? The beauty of digital is it allows us to get that sort of audience insight. You know what sort of age people are responding. You know what content they're responding to. You know what their interest is, what they're clicking on. But I think it's when you're looking for that measurement piece to remember that it's like measuring the impact rather than the action. That it's all well and good saying, right, oh, our open rate was 30% this month, but actually, what was the impact of that email? What did you want people to do? Was it sign up to events? Was it kind of make a donation? How many people actually took that action rather than kind of had that initial sort of opening? And I think one of the key trends at the minute is reducing that sort of over-reliance a lot of charities have around marketing and that constant trying to reach new audiences, and actually build up your email lists and build up your own data. And that's not just because there's sometimes Facebook outages and WhatsApp, and I think we all saw that last week, but it's also thinking about it's cheaper that way. And also your warmest supporters, if they've actually opted in to hear from you, that's the most compliant way of talking to them. And I think everybody's very aware at the minute that Facebook algorithm is heavily pushing people into the paid space. So your organic social isn't getting as much traffic. So it's, I think, lots of kind of claps for that. That's obviously resonated. And I think that is something that all of us can do, whether that's just putting simple sign-up forms on our website or asking existing supporters to sign up. And I think as well, we couldn't not mention COVID, that things have changed over the last year, that a lot of sort of insights that people have built up over many, many years about what time of day people might have opened their emails or how they interacted with it has completely changed. And also more people than ever before are online. So it's then assessing if you think, oh, but my audience is an older generation, it's not online. That, I mean, I currently work for the Salvation Army and previously at Cats Protection. So we definitely had that older audience, and not everybody is online, but a large proportion of your audience is online, and COVID opened up so many more opportunities. And I think it's really important to look at innovation, that what really excites you, what could you do as an organization? And a lot of people are a bit fearful about this because, like what I was saying at the start around that sort of failure, that not all of this is going to work, but there are some tried and tested innovation that's working really well for the sector at the minute. Like virtual events, we've all seen them, particularly on the Facebook space, that they're working really, really well. And I would say for that does still involve time and effort. So I think it's important to kind of remember that this isn't kind of completely replacing physical events, and also you still need to look at that. But there's some really exciting examples, whether that's the kind of 2,000 squats in November, there's a lot of that around at the minute, or jogging. And it's about finding what would work for your audience. Is it dog walking? Is it exercise? Is it actually doing crochet or something completely different? And I think gaming for good is a real growth space. So around that sort of streaming, and that's often kind of people are put off, that they don't think their audience is going to be there. But actually, some of the biggest charities have had success with people that aren't even playing games. They're just talking about the cause and talking about the charity and influencers in a different way. And I know you've got sessions later around different payment methods, and the way people donate has completely transformed, that there is still a minority that will always want their checks and their cash, but it's having all of those options available to make it really quick and easy for your supporters to donate. And thinking when you're building your roadmap, what innovation approach do you want to take? That there's various different ones out there, but how do you want to go about building new products, new processes, and really getting everybody on board with the idea that things are constantly changing and innovation is a really exciting space to be in? So kind of when we're looking at all of this, then it's, well, what do you actually need to prioritize? Because there's an awful lot of things I've just gone through of all the different channels, everything we could potentially be doing. But you can't do everything at once, and you shouldn't do everything at once, and that's completely okay. So like I was saying, when you're looking at your roadmap, it's thinking about, what can I do this month? Then what can I build upon next month and the month after? So I think it's about thinking, what are your overall aims, not platform or project first. So a lot of people will say, oh, this is a really cool platform, we should be doing this, or this is a new channel we should be doing. But actually thinking, what are your aims? And it's perfectly okay to say, actually, that channel doesn't meet our aims, or it does, but we don't have the capacity, so we're going to focus on this. And not get distracted by shiny new toys. I mean, I absolutely love my tech. There are so many amazing kind of tech initiatives out there, but I think it's crucial to accept that we need to be focused, and you will get people, you'll get kind of supporters, volunteers, trustees saying, oh, why are we not doing this? Or this other charity is doing this initiative. But I think it's having that confidence to say, no, this is our plan. This is what's going to help us meet our aims. And I think it's doing some sort of basic kind of product metrics, thinking about what are our easy wins and what are our long-term development, and what's going to help us get there, and what actually might we want to drop. And I think that's crucial, that in order to find more time and more space to do digital, then thinking, actually, we're going to have to drop some stuff. We're not going to be doing all the same things. We're going to be adding in space to allow us to do new, exciting things. And I think it's about getting the basics right. It's about thinking, what are the top things that we want to actually do? Do we have the ability to donate on a website? Because that's not a given. Not everybody charity has that. So do we have an easy way for people to donate? Do we have any sort of welcome journey? And it doesn't have to be an all singing or dancing thing. That might just be a nice personal email that you send from something. And I think it's, what staff and volunteers and trustees do you have on hand that could actually help support this? So what are the kind of key enablers and barriers? Like, what sort of foundations do we need for this roadmap? So I think it is thinking about that technology. It's about, what do we have in place and what could we get in place? Recognizing that we might not have budgets for a lot of this. So what are the basic technologies we need in place to enable us to do this? And although we're talking about digital fundraising, some of that might actually be, okay, we need a database in order to do this. Let's have our investment in that. And data and measurement is so key. And that might be a really basic sort of measurement in your roadmap, just saying, okay, this is where we're at now. This is where we want to get to. What are the key things we want to measure? Because there's so many things we could measure. What are the key things for our organization that we think are the real markers of success, or the real trends that are showing us what people are reacting with? And resource and time is so kind of crucial to everybody, but it's about putting calls out. So do you have a digital trustee on your board? There's a whole initiative to do that. And I think that really helps kind of bringing your organization to a new level if you have a digital trustee. So I would definitely urge you all to recruit that. And also looking at what volunteers, whether that is university students that need something for their placement, that they might only stay a year or two, but they could really help in the meantime. And what's the sort of risk and ethical approach you want to take? So that should be a part of that roadmap, in terms of, what are we comfortable with doing? That there's certain practices online that are legal, so they are kind of doable, but actually as a charity, kind of, what are we comfortable with doing? What are our supporters comfortable with? And budget, that there are a lot of free tools out there that you don't necessarily need to invest, but I would say look at the kind of charity digital platform and the partnerships kind of they have around different suppliers. But then it's like, you don't need much budget, but it's, what can you change in your current budget? What are you currently doing offline that you might get a better return if you put that investment online? And also, how can you build up that business case? So what I was saying before around that, think big, start small and scale quickly. It's okay, think about your aims, but what pilots can you do to then build your case for investment, to go to your board or EMT to then say, actually, this is working really well. This is the sort of return we're getting. Can we have a bit more investment for this? And if done in that approach, then often trustees will say yes to that. And it's looking at that sort of sharing expertise. And I think that's what the sector is so great for. There's like days like today, but also initiatives like Digital Candle, where you can be matched up with a digital expert if you've got a particular issue or a particular topic you want to discuss. And I think it's thinking that you might not have all the digital skills in-house, but what other resources can you lean on and look at? And like I said before, like digital's all about people. I know there's a lot of sessions around the sort of tech side, which is really important, but at its heart, it's still people talk on social media about causes they're passionate about. They're often passionate about your cause. So it's how do you tap into that? And it's really important to get buy-in from your organisation and beyond. So whether that's your corporate supporters, whether that's your trustees, whether that's your volunteers, whether that's your local community, there's plenty of different areas that you can get support from, and also getting buy-in that everybody wants digital journeys to succeed. So how can you utilise that sort of goodwill? And also looking at what skills have you got. So that might be a really basic skills audit with people assessing themselves and their managers then chipping in, or the board to be like, actually, what skills do we have in-house? You might identify gaps where you might want to supplement it with volunteers or digital trustees, but what's the training plan? And there's lots of free training resources out there. I'd have a look at the Platypus Digital, kind of great free courses, and there's also Google Garage. And I think that's really important to say that actually we don't have to do expensive training courses, though there are some great ones out there if you do have the budget. What can we do to build up our skills? And also what can we do to understand our audience? And your audience love to be involved. So I would say don't do all of this in isolation. Actually just put a call out to your current supporters saying, oh, we're looking at certain digital stuff. Would anybody want to come back and be our digital guinea pigs and test things out, or share ideas, or have an innovation session around what they've seen? And people love to be asked. You'd be amazed at how many supporters are really touched that you've thought to actually involve them, and also the great insight you can get from them. So it's a win-win for everybody. So I think one of the hardest things is actually that digital culture piece, that there's a lot of different platforms and projects and things you can do, but how can you change that culture? And I think one of the key things is moving to digital first. And by that, I don't mean that everything is going to be digital. I just mean that you think about digital at the start of all your different initiatives. And it's around moving to the audience rather than fundraising team led. And what I mean by that is you'll often see a lot of charity newsletters and social media channels, and their content is made up of different income streams, whether that's actually different people or whether that's just different initiatives, and taking turns rather than flipping it on its head and thinking, what is our audience responding to? What are they really keen on? And how can we serve them more of the content that they're really interested in, rather than saying, oh, well, we need a corporate initiative, we then need a kind of individual giving one and need to balance it. Actually flip it on its head and say, right, what storytelling approach are we going to take? And remember whatever principles you've picked for your organisation that you're going to stick to, and have that sort of continual learning approach, but also accepting that this is going to take time. There might be some days when actually you feel like it's a backward step, or things aren't working, or it's really frustrating, but remembering that you are on this journey, and if you take the small steps, you'll eventually get to that sort of big change. So what we've kind of run through in that kind of whirlwind half an hour is looking at how can you go away today or tomorrow and look at how do we build our roadmap. It doesn't have to be something fancy. It might be as simple as an A4 piece of paper saying, right, this is what we want to do as an organisation. These are the key things that we're going to look at and the key trends we think for our organisation and how we can build on that. So next steps, and this is actually a picture of my sister's real steps, that remember that sort of kind of think big. Where do you want to get to with digital? And I think if you keep your eyes on that, then it's really exciting space to be. And start small, whether it's doing one thing per quarter, per month, per week to actually build on it. And then you can all come back in a year's time and tell me what difference you've made. That I work with a lot of small charities kind of doing this, that it seems overwhelming at the start. There's so much to do, but actually, if we're just doing little steps, then in a year's time, you kind of be amazed at how far you've come with that. And I think it is around being ambitious and supporting each other. That, like I said, not everything's going to work. And that's okay. But how can we scale really quickly the things that are really working and make a real step change in income for our organisation? So thank you for listening for all of that. And I hope that that was sort of really helpful in kind of starting you on that digital journey. And I now stop sharing. And I think Claire's going to facilitate our Q&A.
Wow, Emily, that was amazing. Look at all the little emojis. Everybody's super happy. But no, seriously, what a masterclass. I think we had a lot of questions saying, can we have a copy of the slides, please? And yes, we will be sharing the slides. And actually this session's also being recorded, so you can share it more widely in your organizations, because I think there's so much content in there. It's something that you might want to come back to over and over again. But I love everything that you've said, and we do have a lot of questions coming up, which I will go through in more detail. But I love your approach about the step-by-step approach and your little staircase. I mean, I did also like the staircase with the rainbow colors, which is wonderful, but I like the one which really shows how a little change over time can create something that's quite significant. Is that something you've experienced, you've seen in your work?
Yeah, I think that's definitely, because like when I was at Cats Protection, we kind of took it from an income of about 250k to about 10 million a year.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a big
so I think when we're talking about scaling quickly, we're talking about scaling very quickly, but that was just done on the, okay, we started Facebook advertising with a really small budget. It's now like 100 times the budget we used to have, but we took that kind of, right, we're just going to start this small. And I've worked and helped some really small charities like Fight Bladder Cancer, who didn't have much set up. And we were like, right, how can we just set up a basic email journey for people? And like I say, working with volunteers on a very basic email journey. And that really made an impact to them. So I think it doesn't matter kind of what size the organisation or what kind of scale you're talking about. I think that approach I found really works. Because if you try and do everything really fast, and it just gets too overwhelming, and then people are like, oh, this digital thing didn't work, we'll go back to the old ways. Whereas it's like that building up trust and building up confidence that we can do this as a charity, and kind of celebrate the success. And I think that's so important to actually say, this did go really well, and shout about that.
Those are brilliant, and I love your examples. I'm going to run just because I can, I'm going to run a quick poll in the audience, if you don't mind. I'd love to know which channels you are currently using, and I'm using the on the basis of the ones you listed, Emily, in your presentation. So if you guys want to try and click on that while I go through some of the questions that are popping up, and then we'll show the response, because I'm really interested in the mix of channels that people are using right now. Emily, we're getting a lot of people asking which of the what were those benchmarking tools that you mentioned? I think that was Google Garage. What are some of the others that people should be looking at?
So if you have a look at NCVO's digital maturity matrix, that's not just around fundraising, that's across the board that you can look at. And that kind of basically gives you a kind of score in different areas. So it might be around like more of your kind of comm side, or it might be around your infrastructure. And I think as well, the Charity Digital Code, I'd urge everybody to kind of look at that. These are both kind of completely free tools. And then that gives you a score of kind of where you're currently at. And then you can work through the various different principles and the kind of great websites around how you can then develop it. So I think that's great to do at the start of your journey. So then you can then come back to it in a year's time and see kind of where you've got to.
And well, perfect. And I love the idea of doing it now and then at regular intervals, so that not only do you have a picture right now, but you're also tracking your progress. I think that's lovely. And as you were saying, it's a good way to celebrate success. One of the questions which obviously that would be nice, but maybe you're aware of something. So Mark Graham asked, is there a digital strategy document that we can just use as a template? Is there something that we can start from if there's not that much there?
Yeah, I was going to say, I know Charity Digital does have some great resources in their section around kind of starting your digital strategy around that. So I think that would be useful. And then also the Charity Digital Code I just mentioned has different principles and things that you should remember for that. But I would also say talk to fellow charities. Find a charity that might be a little bit further ahead in their digital journey, because I know everybody's very happy to share strategies and share resources, and I'm quite happy to share mine if that's useful in terms of what are the key structures and principles.
Fantastic, that's brilliant. Oh, there's the result. Well, that's well, obviously a lot of websites. That's really interesting. It's a great mix, and it's 20% using online giving, and you were saying that's fairly easy one, maybe a low-hanging fruit to put in place quite quickly. Would that be fair enough?
Yeah, I think that is kind of easy and free to kind of set up the basics. And I think as well that a lot of charities are right at the start of their digital journey. There was a stat I heard yesterday that 62% of charities aren't doing sort of online giving yet. And I think that it's not to be disheartened by the fact that kind of you're not there yet. It's thinking kind of, right, where can you get to?
A few questions about the NCVO digital maturity tool, which I think Zoe is going to try to find a link. Yeah, there you go. She's done it already in the chat for people to find. Well, we've got time for a couple more questions. One lovely question from Erica, which you talk about scaling quickly, but you've also said at the beginning it's fine to fail fast. And do you have any examples that you're happy to share about failing fast?
Yeah, I think there are things that I've done in the past that I would definitely do differently now. And I think some of it was around actually not doing enough research and stuff beforehand. And in the past, like I was saying before, like do not get distracted by shiny new toys. But in the past, we've been like, okay, let's launch a new kind of payment method. But then, which is great, kind of be like, oh, everybody can donate by text now. But then I think we've done that with a small little group before. And I think the bit that didn't quite match up was actually still remembering what I said. Well, it doesn't work if you just go out with a post saying, oh, you can now donate to us by text. It's actually, well, why should I donate to you? It's not the payment platform that kind of works. And I know for some other charities, it's been around dipping their toe into kind of gaming for good, and it's not worked. And it might have been because actually they've come in too heavy with a very kind of corporate charity approach, whereas actually digital fundraising is still about building those relationships with people. And I think that's still the key to that. But I think it is finding stuff, and it might be really simple. You trial a new proposition or try new content, and that actually falls completely flat. You might put out some posts. So I think I would say for that particularly when you're looking for digital advertising, start with doing stuff on organic social. So it might be, instead of launching a whole Facebook advertising campaign, put a few different propositions out on your organic Facebook and see what works before you go about investing different things that might not land well with your audience.
Oh, that's super helpful. There's loads of questions and we won't be able to cover them all, but I know you'll be around in the lounge for people to ask you more questions. One final one, I guess, which is about the digital trustees. And you mentioned that there is a campaign right now to bring in more digital trustees. I'm wondering, or actually Sue is wondering what that campaign is. And I want to sort of elaborate a little bit on this and what can a digital trustee bring to the especially to small organizations, I guess.
Yeah. So I think in terms of that, like what they can bring, I think they can bring a lot of the sort of understanding and the things I've just gone through around kind of what does that kind of wider picture look like and how can digital work for our organizations. So if you're active on Twitter and social media, there are sort of campaigns, and Zoe Amar's been kind of at the heart of a lot of them, trying to, I think everybody knows Zoe,
who is a trustee of Charity Digital and an amazing person. Follow her on Twitter because she does do a lot of digital trustee promotion.
Yeah, and I think that it's just having that voice on the board. So when things around particularly investment, because I've spoken to a lot of charity boards on behalf of charity staff, that when they've been trying to make their case for investment in digital, the boards just haven't necessarily understood the potential, or they've been a bit nervous about it. So it's then about having that voice that can kind of be that voice of fighting for digital, and thinking as well from an organization as a whole, how can digital help us? It goes much beyond fundraising. So I think there are a lot of digital staff, myself included, that in our spare time are trustees. So if anybody is interested, then happy for them to get in touch, and I can try and put them in contact with somebody who's interested.
Wonderful. That was absolutely wonderful, Emily. Thank you so very much for sharing your experience.